The wind cut sharply through the dimly lit streets of Chicago that evening, and the icy rain made the sidewalks slick and unforgiving. On a quiet corner, a small figure huddled against the biting cold, his little arms wrapped desperately around a tiny child who shivered uncontrollably. "Sir, my baby sister is freezing." A frail voice trembled through the storm. The boy's cheeks were streaked with tears, his tiny hands raw and red from the cold. Passers-by hurried past, their faces buried in scarves and umbrellas, seemingly oblivious to the suffering right in front of them. At that moment, Jacob Harris, the CEO of a thriving tech company, was walking briskly back from a late meeting, his expensive coat buttoned up and his mind consumed with spreadsheets, boardroom pressures, and quarterly targets. He wasn't used to noticing the world outside his glass towers, but the desperate voice sliced through his thoughts. When he looked down, he saw the boy clutching a little sister no older than 3, both shivering and soaked to the bone. Without thinking, Jacob removed his thick wool coat and wrapped it around both children, feeling their tiny bodies trembling against him. If this opening moment touched you, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel if you believe in kindness and second chances. Jacob knelt to meet the boy's tear-filled eyes. "Where's your home, little one?" he asked gently. The boy shook his head, sobbing, unable to explain. His words were muffled by the cold and fear. Jacob's heart ached as he saw the threadbare coat the boy wore, his tiny boots soaked and covered in mud. Instinct took over. Without hesitation, he scooped them both into his arms, ignoring the stares of hurried pedestrians, and led them to the warmth of his car. Driving through the city, Jacob couldn't stop glancing at the children. The baby's soft breaths were uneven. Her little hands curled into fists as she shivered. The boy, whose name was Matthew, kept murmuring that their mother had gone to work and never returned, that their father had left years ago, and that they hadn't eaten since morning. Jacob's mind raced. He couldn't fathom the depth of this sudden, raw poverty he was witnessing in the heart of one of America's richest cities. The contrast between his life and theirs was almost unbearable, yet something inside him refused to turn away. He drove them to a small diner he knew would be closing soon. There, he ordered soup, sandwiches, and hot chocolate, watching as Matthew helped his sister sip the warm liquid. For the first time that night, there was a glimmer of relief on the boy's face, a small flicker of hope in the eyes of a child who had grown up too quickly. Jacob listened as Matthew told him about the long, lonely hours they had endured, how they huddled together at night in an empty apartment that smelled of cold and dust. He could hardly breathe as the boy spoke, the innocence of youth colliding with the harshness of life. For hours, Jacob stayed with them. He called social services, but the system seemed slow, overwhelmed, and unsure. As he sat there, he realized that sometimes the difference between despair and hope was one compassionate hand reaching out. That night he made a decision. He couldn't just leave them in the hands of strangers. He couldn't ignore the bond that had already formed. So he invited them to stay at his penthouse, just until a safer solution could be arranged. Matthew's eyes widened, disbelief and relief mingling in the same expression. His sister finally stopped trembling, lulled by the warmth and security that enveloped her. In the days that followed, Jacob became more than just a temporary guardian. He saw Matthew's natural curiosity, the cleverness in his small smile, the way he would try to help even when he felt hopeless. He enrolled them in a nearby school, bought clothes and shoes that fit properly for the first time in months, and slowly, carefully began to nurture the trust that had been broken so many times in their young lives. The little girl, Sophia, started to giggle again, a sound that made Jacob's chest tighten with a protective warmth he had never expected to feel. What struck him most was how resilient the children were. Despite everything, they held on to each other, their bond unshakable. Matthew learned to laugh again, to speak without fear, to dream about a future that seemed almost unimaginable just a week ago. Jacob, in turn, began to understand that wealth alone didn't make a life meaningful, compassion did. One evening, as he watched the two children play with building blocks on the floor of his apartment, he realized that saving them wasn't just about providing food or warmth. It was about restoring hope, about showing them that someone, somewhere, cared enough to change their lives. Weeks turned into months, and Jacob's bond with Matthew and Sophia deepened. He worked with social workers to ensure that their future was secure, that they would never be left in the cold again. The children's laughter became a constant presence in his penthouse, a reminder that small acts of kindness could ripple into extraordinary transformations. Jacob often reflected on that stormy night when he first encountered them, amazed at how a simple decision, to stop, to notice, to care, had rewritten the story of 3 lives forever. Before we conclude, if this story touched your heart, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts and feelings. It means a lot to hear from you. The transformation was not just theirs, it was his too. Jacob had learned that life's richest rewards came not from power, money, or accolades, but from human connection, empathy, and the courage to act. He watched Matthew and Sophia grow, knowing that their lives would always carry the memory of that one cold night in Chicago, when a stranger chose to become a guardian angel, when a CEO chose humanity over indifference, and in that moment, surrounded by laughter, warmth, and hope, Jacob realized that family is not always born, it is sometimes chosen, one act of love at a time. If this story inspired you or moved you deeply, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to spread more stories of compassion and second chances. And remember, even the smallest gesture can change a life forever.